This is Florida OA event host items part 2. Special patches for special people beginning in the year 2000. We covered everything up until 2000 last week. Today, just as a reminder, in Florida, we hold 2 events every year. What we call a conference, what everyone else in the world calls a conclave. That's in the spring, and then in the fall, we have an event that used to be called the seminars. Now it's called the Section Leadership Summit. And in the year 2000, the section S4 was all of Florida except the Panhandle and going into the middle of Georgia. In 2000, the section conference was hosted by a Chocody Lodge. We were fairly simple in our host needs, just a flap and a pocket patch. The section seminars were hosted by Aal-Pa-Tah. They too chose to be very simple in their needs, 1 flap and 1 pocket patch. The next lodge in 2001 was Timaquan 340. They went all out. 2 different flaps, the regular blue monochrome and the blue mylar monochrome. The regular blue was unrestricted and the mylar had a service requirement. There was also a host pocket patch, host jacket patch, host neckerchief, and a host chenille. Almost everything that they made for regular attendees, there was also a host version. In between or after the conference, but before the seminars, was another realignment within Southern Region that moved all of the Georgia lodges to other sections. Many of the lodges, though, came together for a joint event held by S4S, which was the remainder of Florida, and S4N, which was Southern Georgia all the way out to Ustoga. That event was hosted by Immokalee 358, but they didn't make a host patch for it. And there was much rejoicing. In 2002, the conference was hosted by Seminole 85. Another occasion where you have to look at the back of a patch, not just the front. There were a few hundred of the patches that were found with a black backing when all the other ones were blue. So there's a variety there. There was a host pocket patch, a host jacket patch, and a host neckerchief. And for the first time, a host bullion. Seminars that year were hosted by Tipasaw 326. They kept it simple with just 1 host patch. 2003, however, Similachi. As I have been told, the youth that was responsible for patches really liked to have several different color borders. So they had, for regular members, an orange border and a maroon border. On the maroon border, there are varieties. Where the torch comes up over the border of the flap is a cut edge, where the rest of the patch was a rolled edge. Some of them have an orange cut edge underneath, some of them have the maroon. And the same thing for the copper mylar border, which was a gift from the conference leadership for exceptional service. Again, orange and maroon. There was a green mylar border that was issued to youth and adult lodge leadership. The mylar flaps came out after the conference itself. And for the first time, gratefully the only time, the host lodge created mini patches. The mini host flap and the mini pocket patch, about 2 inches at the longest dimension, they really weren't as popular as they thought it was going to be. There was also a regular sized host pocket patch with varieties for the shade of yellow underneath the lettering. In 2003, at Chocody's, our 2003 seminars hosted by a Chocody Lodge, just a single pocket patch. Aal-Pa-Tah hosted in 2004, maintaining their tradition of 3 different host flaps. Red bordered was $3, the green border was 10, and the blue border was 20. They had 4 different pocket patches. The round patch was unrestricted. The patches that resembled the conference design itself with the word host in different colors had various requirements to them. There was also a participation pin that was available for those that partook in the training sessions on Saturday morning. The difference between the regular and the host pin is just that the host pin had Aal-Pa-Tah 237 stamped on the back of it. Along with those items were 2 more neckerchiefs. The patch on cloth was unrestricted to host lodge members. And after the conference, there was a version that was directly embroidered in a black cloth that was given to special lodge workers. Seminars that year were hosted by Osceola, and their host item was just a variation of the regular design, just adding the word host and 564. Okay, and we come back around to our favorite lodge, Oshotka's turn to host the conference. For that conference, they had 3 different flaps. 2 of them were on sateen, 1 was fully embroidered. The ones with the green background have an HH embroidered into the back of it. Those, they have a scholarship set up for in the memory of a longtime lodge member that passed away before the conference by the name of Harold Hollis. So sales of those items went into that fund. The host neckerchief with the regular conference design and 2 different pie-shaped patches made up the neckerchiefs. But that's not all. There were 4 different pocket patches that were created. Each of them, well, you had the regular one on the left, the X50 that resembled the conference patch design. There was a special $8 or $10 conference patch. So the octagon shape with the felt background was the special patch design. There was a special host version of that. 2 sateens, a workday patch, a pin, and a slide. But that's not all. They also had 2 different host chenilles, embroidered on the back and chenilled on the front. One of them violates what I consider to be a basic patch design rule. Never make a patch bigger than an 8.5 by 11 sheet of paper. It won't fit in a book. So when you make a chenille that measures 11 by 15.5, you have to find a different place for it. They made 50 of those for the Maury Clancy Indian Campership Fund. Seminars that year were hosted by Timaquan, and they only made 1 flap. 2006, Tipasaw had the conference. They kept it pretty simple, just 1 host flap, 1 pocket patch, and 2 different versions of the neckerchief, 1 on regular cloth, 1 on satin of the same shade. Seminars that year were hosted by Seminole, and they did nothing. All right, 2007 was hosted by a Chocody 200. I'm a member of a Chocody, so whenever I talk about them, I say we. We started out with a mylar border for service. The design was pretty popular that people wanted to just buy a regular version of it. So a few months after that order, we ordered some with just a plain regular border that were unrestricted. Between the 2 of them, we had ordered another flap to fit. That's why the numbering is not sequential between the 2. We had a host version of the pocket patch and the jacket patch and the neckerchief. We also created the so far only host council shoulder patch. That came about because the University of Florida Gators had won the basketball championship in 2006, the year before the conference, and then 3 months before the conference won the football championship. So we had an opportunity to order something. We had connections with the athletic association at the school. Letters were exchanged, deals were made, and we had a council strip. We also had a chenille that was front and back. It earned the nickname of the oven mitt because it kind of looks like an oven mitt. We also created a host pin, which was just the colorized version of the regular conference pin. The seminars that year were hosted by Simulachi 239, and they had a Mardi Gras theme. So they put a Mardi Gras hat on top of their Seminole for the host flap. For 2008, Osceola hosted that conference. All I can say about the design is that's exactly the way they designed it. It as a tie-dyed host version. 3 different flaps. Green border was unrestricted. Yellow had a service requirement. The purple border was for special people, and the word "with the him away" was on 142 of them. 8 of them did not have that word on there, and those were given to even more special people for awards. Along with those host items, there was a host pocket patch, a host jacket patch, a host chenille, buckle, and a neckerchief. Now, while the blood donor patch says Osceola host on it, anybody that donated a pint of blood at that conference could have received one. It wasn't limited to just lodge members. But it's included because it says Osceola host. In 2008, the seminars were hosted by Aal-Pa-Tah. Along with that event was the return of some of the lodges from Georgia into the section, and a flap and a host pocket patch. 2009 was hosted by Timaquan 340. Those are not naked guys on the design. Those are not sumo wrestlers. That's a depiction of the pre-Columbian natives that were in the Tampa Bay area at the time, before Columbus. The white background, anybody in the host lodge could buy it. The yellow background was just for chairmen and advisors, and only 1 pocket patch. And along with that, they also had a flap for work service. Seminars in 2009 were hosted by Tipasaw. If you collect Florida things, then you need this patch in 2 different collections. One for section items because it was for the section seminars, but also Tipasaw incorporated that as part of their annual activity patch set. If you check out how they're designed, it spells out the word Tipasaw. And to do that, the seminar's host patch became the first I in the word. Okay, Section Conference 2010 was hosted by Seminole. They really could not keep with one design, as you will soon see. The conference patch itself looked like the X15 host patch. They had 2 flaps that one was for service, one was for just hosting the conference. But then they also had 2 different jacket patches. One was patriotic, the other one, I don't know what that is to this day. It kind of looks like Gollum looking for his precious. That one was a thank you from the host lodge. That was also, the design was also used for their host neckerchief, and then a chenille that was double-sided, embroidered on the back. 2010 seminars was hosted by Timaquan 340, just a pocket patch, no flap. Aal-Pa-Tah hosted in 2011, only 2 flaps this time, and 2 pocket patches, and 1 neckerchief. Seminars that year was hosted by Achakati, and we kept it simple with 1 flap. Simulachi 239 was hosting again in 2012. They created the first 2-piece set for hosting a conference, then an additional flap and an additional pocket patch, and a host neckerchief. Seminoachi is a very small lodge, so they can get away with issuing small quantities and keep all of their members covered. For the rest of us, it may be hard to find. Osceola 564 hosted the seminars, and they had just one flap. Now, ordinarily, 2013 would have been the return of Oshatka to hosting the conference. But in 2005, their camp was destroyed by Hurricane Wilma and remained closed until 2012. They were not in a position to be able to host the conference. The schedule had to be juggled a bit, and it returned back to Seminole Lodge after a 3-year gap. Their host items did not resemble anything close to the conference, but their activity patches that year had a theme of mystical creatures and tall tales for their activity patch set. So that's what their host flaps were designed for. The two flaps on left and center also had a little dangle that went underneath it as part of the set. Those are much harder to find than the flaps themselves. They also had a host pocket patch, a host jacket patch, and a truly hideous host chenille. It is like embroidered into cardboard. It was not worth the price. They also had a host neckerchief and a host belt buckle. The only way to tell the difference between the buckles is the host version was brass and the attendees was pewter. 2013 seminars was hosted by Timaquan 340. The design for the host flap and for the event itself resembled the patch for the 1982 section conference that they also hosted. All right, 2014 was hosted by a Chakotay 200. They had two flaps, different color borders with no real distinction as to why they were different. The same $5 could buy you either one. There was a host pocket patch and a host jacket patch, host neckerchief. The first section leadership summit was in 2014, hosted by Aal-Pa-Tah, just one patch and one flap. Tipasaw hosted the section conference in 2015 for the centennial year. That is a stylized design of a turtle with the Tipasaw TP in the middle of it. One flap, one pocket patch, a buckle, a neckerchief, but you could also buy the patch for the neckerchief loosely. Some of the committees issued patches of their own. One of them was handmade. The other one was a regular patch ordered from a different company. Seminars that year were hosted by Similachi, and they made nothing for the event. Okay, now it is Oshatka's turn. 6 flaps, 4 pocket patches, 3 neckerchiefs, 2 chenilles, and 1 slide. 1 chenille for everyone in the host lodge, and a different version for members of the conference committee. Neckerchiefs, unrestricted, and anybody could buy it. That was the black cloth. Blue cloth was for lodge members. Green cloth was conference committee members. And there was a similar color scheme for the flaps themselves. One of them was for the 2015 Lodge Executive Committee, but it has Section Conference 2016 host on it, so that is included. There was the red background had a service requirement, and they only made 50 of those. The regular conference patch had a version for the host lodge, gold mylar and the word host on the tab. Osceola kept it simple. They had just one patch, one host patch for their 2016 SLS. At this time, there was a little bit of consolidation within the Florida section. Seminole and Timaquan merged together, forming Otoyahudi Lodge number 89. And they hosted the 2017 conference almost immediately. 2 flaps, 2 pocket patches. The red bordered version of each had a restriction on it, 1 host neckerchief, and 1 host jacket patch. They also hosted the 2017 SLS, no host items. 2018, Osceola Lodge was also celebrating their 50th anniversary, and they hosted the conference that year. The host neckerchiefs and the host pocket patches are very hard to find. They had just enough for everyone with almost no extras. The SLS for 2018 was hosted by Chakotay Lodge. There was a black bordered flap that they created that, even though they hosted it, they sold it to anybody with money, while from all of the lodges, while the purple mylar bordered version was just for host lodge members, 2 per person. Aal-Pa-Tah hosted again in 2019 with 2 different flaps, 1 neckerchief, and 1 pocket patch. The SLS for 2019 was hosted by Tipasaw. They had just 1 flap. The event that year, or the theme for that event that year, had a Dr. Seuss theme to it. Now, while most of the world canceled their events in 2020 and had nothing for them, Chakotay Lodge was scheduled to host the 2020 conference. It was canceled, but that didn't stop us from having 2 different flaps. We resumed meeting again as a section in 2021. That event was hosted by Tipasaw with just a host flap, a host pocket patch, and a host mask. The SLS that year was hosted by Oshatka. They kept things under control with just 1 host flap and 1 host pocket patch. At that point, the National reorganized the regions, and we were redesignated as Section E5. That conference was hosted by Similachi. That year, there was a 2-piece set. They made more flaps than pocket patches, and they only made 36 neckerchiefs because they only had orders for 35 of them. SLS this past year was hosted by Uda Yehudi 89. They only made 1 item, just a regular pocket patch. And that brings us up to date.